Today we shall talk about cell, the unit of life. When the question is put to you, what is a cell? The first obvious answer that will come, that is, cell is the basic unit of life. So cell, what is cell? Cell are those units that makes up living organisms, that gives the structure to living organisms, as also they're responsible for every function that goes on in a living organism that gives life. So let us start with the lesson. Now cells, the definition, the smallest most basic unit of most basic unit of all living organisms that is still considered alive. That is an important point here, that is still considered alive. So the smallest most basic part of all living organisms. If we talk of a microorganism, then it will, like say here, this is a microorganism, a picture, an image of microorganism is given here. So for it, the cell itself is its life, cell itself is its structure, cell itself, that single cell itself performs all the functions that make it living. So even the same picture here, microorganisms. Then these are some other images, plant cells, these are the epithelial cells. So these are some of the images, RBCs, these are some of the images of different types of cells. Now examples, like say the bacterial cell here, muscle cells, fatty cells. Then you have, these are the plant cells, parenchyma cells here we have. Then cells of the skin, of the bone, of the internal organs. So these are the minute here with the dots that you see, each of them, they are the cells that comes together in multicellular organisms. They come together to perform the function collectively. So that is cell. Now cell size and types. Cells, the basic units of organisms, can be observed only under the microscope. We cannot view cells with our naked eyes. Only under the microscope, like say compound microscope, electron microscopes, or scanning electron microscopes. So the size of the cells also varies in from nanometers to the largest of the single cell, largest cell, which we consider as the egg of the ostrich, that is considered to be largest cell. Then in humans, the largest cell is considered to be the neuron cells. Now the first person to view cells in 1665, Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke, what did he observe? He took the scrapings of the bark of a tree. Okay, the scrapings of the bark of tree, he observed, okay, under a handmade microscope. Okay, this was the most primitive microscope, and these were the cells that he had observed. He observed some cell compartment like structures, so he called these compartment like structures or box like structures as cell means that unit, a compartment. So that is how the term cell was proposed or was given in 1665 by Robert Hooke. The three basic types of cells. Okay, the three basic types of cells are, like say, bacterial cell, plant cells, animal cells. Bacterial cells means these are the prokaryotic unicellular cells, plant cells, and animal cells. Now, the first to view cells, as already I talked about, Robert Hooke. There's the image of Robert Hooke. He called them cells because they looked like small rooms that monks lived in, small compartments. Then, furthermore, in 1673, Anton von Leeuwenhoek, he was the first to view organism. Robert Hooke had observed the cell, okay, from bark of trees, cork cells, which are dead cells actually, whereas Anton von Leeuwenhoek had observed the first organism, living thing. He had observed the first living thing, okay, who made the microscopes. Okay, he was also the person to construct the microscope. Leeuwenhoek, what did he use? He used a handheld microscope. This was a handheld microscope, somewhat like the magnifying glass that we use. okay, to view pond water. That means he took some water, few drops of water, and he observed some living organisms floating in that water. Then later on, of course, a lot of research was made, a lot of facts were put forward, but later three scientists separately, of course, separately they had worked together, and they three of them they worked separately, independent of each other, but they came to some conclusion. So all these three findings were put together in the form of a cell theory. So let us see first the beginning of the cell theory. 1838, botanist is a person who studies plants, Matthias Sheldon. He concluded that all plants were made of cells. He said that all plants, whatever plants are growing on around us, all of them they have these compartment like structures, these cellular structures. Matthias Sheldon, so what did he say? He said that all plants they are made up of cells. Then later in 1839, zoologist, person who studies animals, Theodor Schwann, concluded that all animals are also made of cells. So initially it was Sheldon who said that plants are made up of cells. Then later Schwann also concluded that even animals are made up of cells. So Schwann said that all animals are made up of cells. Then again, 1855, this time it was 1855, a Dr. Rudolf Virchow. He observed under the microscopes that he was observing cells under the microscope. By that time, microscopy had developed far more better. Microscopy had developed. Also, those conclusions were given that organisms are made up of cells. So by that time, what did he do? When he was observing some cells under the microscope, he saw that they were dividing. He said that when he saw that the cells were dividing means what? They were increasing in number. That means one cell was becoming two. From those two cells, again, four cells were arising, two each. So he reasoned, he said that cells come from pre-existing cells by division. He said that all cells they arise from something, a cell which was already present. A cell cannot form out of nothing. So this is Virchow and he observed the dividing cells. So here is an image, microscopic image of dividing cells. Later, all these three concepts were taken together. Sheldon, Schwann and Virchow. All the three concepts were taken together and then now we call it as the cell theory, which states that all living things are made up of cells. All living things, which includes both plants and animals. Cells are the smallest living units. So, when it is said that all living organisms, all living things are made up of cells, so it's quite obvious that beyond cells, also it was concluded from those findings only that beyond cells there are no living organisms existing, because when the cell was broken down there is no more further life seen beyond cells. Cells will aggregate to give life. Individually a cell can be alive, but when you break down the cell there is no life existing. So cells were considered to be the smallest living units. Then furthermore, as per Virchow's finding, all cells come from pre-existing cells through cell division. So this is about cell theory, the introductory part on cell. The next lecture we will proceed further. We will talk about the types of cells.